I'm Brandon Amoroso, and this is the D2Z podcast, building and growing your business from a Gen Z perspective. Hey everyone, thanks for tuning into D2Z, a podcast about using the Gen Z mindset to grow your business. I'm Gen Z entrepreneur Brendan Mahony, founder and president of retention as a service agency Electric, as well as the co-founder of Scaleless. And today I'm talking with Brendan Mahony, who's the founder and CEO of Sunset, which is a company that helps companies shut down. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me, man. Appreciate it.
So before we dive into the interesting topics behind, why and how you can shut down a business, can you give everybody just a brief background on yourself and sort of how you ended up here?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, definitely an interesting journey to run this company. But went through Y Combinator a few years ago, back in 2018. So kind of started like a tool for digital agencies out of there, ended up selling that to private equity. Kind of immediately started another company after that. Should have taken a minute, but ended up not working out. Couldn't really find product market fit. So went through the dissolution process, knew nothing about it, was very sad and painful and long and expensive. And so, that's kind of how we got to where we are today. So yeah, run a company, like you mentioned, called Sunset. We help primarily, tech companies wind down, handling, all the legal, tax, and operational aspects that go into a dissolution.
Are there any components to what you do that are required when a business is getting acquired versus, actually like shutting down because they're closing the doors?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, especially if you haven't gone through an acquisition before, there's a lot of different flavors of them. So a lot of them might be an asset sale, actually. So, let's say the buyer is looking to acquire your startup. They could do a full stock sale. So they're actually literally purchasing all of the stock of your entity. And there's some benefits to that, but you can imagine there are a lot of risks, right? If you're buying the whole entity, you're buying all the contingent liabilities. So like anything that comes out of the woodworks, you're the rightful owner of that. And so what a lot of buyers will do is they'll do asset sales. So they'll literally just pluck specific assets and or liabilities even from your company and just purchase those. But they'll actually, in the process, leave behind your corporate shell that has all the other, like we talked about, contingent liabilities, taxes, state agencies, registrations, all that good stuff will still be there. And similarly with acqui-hires too, right? So when, maybe they're just getting some employment agreements, things like that. So we work with a lot of companies who had great exits, but yeah, they were in the form of an asset sale or an acqui-hire. And, you still basically need to go through the entire dissolution process despite that.
Yeah, I don't think that, because my exit was an asset sale, I don't think that the full dissolution process ever necessarily took place. As I probably have the state of Washington calling me right now for my employer tax.
Exactly.
Payroll that has not been paid in like 3 years. What split would you say is like, of the transactions that you see, are most of them primarily like asset sales?
Well, yeah. So what's, the benefit of a stock sale, let's say, is, you don't need to do the dissolution, right? Like the entity was fully engulfed in the acquirer. So we don't work with, we're not in those transactions. But, I would say probably about 30 to 40% of the companies you work with have some type of asset purchase agreement that was executed when they're working with us. So it's a decent chunk have gone through kind of an asset sale of some kind or acqui-hire.
I think it's relatively obvious if you're selling your business in an asset sale why you would want to use a business like yours to dissolve the entity. But let's say you're somebody who everything's just gone to shit, and you're just like, oh, now I still have to deal with it. And what are some of the repercussions if you don't handle things appropriately when it comes to dissolving the business?
Yeah, we definitely get this question a lot. So I'll kind of caveat and say, most of the companies we work with are venture backed or have some type of, third party investors that put capital into the business. And so using that as an example to start with, it's actually pretty, it's not very cool to just like go zombie mode because what a lot of founders don't understand is as a venture fund, any of these types of firms, any investors, they get audited. And when they get audited, they need proof that your company actually shut down. So yeah, you might think, hey, I sent an email, whatever, we're shut down, but they actually need that certificate of dissolution to go to the IRS and say, hey, yeah, this company properly dissolved. So one aspect is that. So like this is definitely a big reputational game, especially in the startup world. And so it's not investors. We talk to a lot of investors and they get really not happy when folks literally just walk away. So that's one. But two, you're effectively building up a case against yourself with all these state agencies, the IRS. So you can do that. And like, are they going to go, caveat, nothing on this podcast is legal or tax advice. Are they going to go after you? Probably not. Have they? Yeah, they've definitely gone after people for sure for, being extraordinarily delinquent on their taxes. So, yeah.
Got it. No, that that makes sense. Um, what are you know what are some of the things that you took away from your previous businesses that made you even want to embark upon this as the as the venture?
Yeah. So, I mean, going deeper in the story. So after my second company didn't work out and we dissolved it, it took like 2 years where I was working for other folks. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to start. Um, and during that time, I started getting texts from like different YC buddies, other founders I know, just being like, hey, man, shit is not going well. Like, this is bad. I know you went through this dissolution. Like, can you help me out? So after like the third or fourth text, I was like, this is insane. Like, it's so easy to start something. You go on like Stripe Atlas, pay like $500, takes like 5 minutes. Really not the same for winding things down. So, you know, that. That was kind of the journey to get here. But yeah, I kind of lost thread of your initial question, so I apologize. Actually.
Like what even prompted you to want to start
Oh
this?
God.
The business that shuts down businesses. It really is my favorite like tagline for a company.
Oh my God. No.
Uh, but
It's
and
like a
also
funeral home.
I didn't think about like the asset sales though and the acquihires. So it's not like you're just a grim reaper here. Like you are
No.
also
No.
helping facilitate great things as well too.
Exactly. I know it's not all doom and gloom, but you know why I wanted to do it? It's when I was helping some of those founders, not when we are actually running this business, um, it felt really good. Like, everyone says like start companies where you're solving your own problem. And this was really, when I dissolved my company personally, like this was a huge low point in my life just in general. And then I was kind of saddled with like 7 to 9 months of dealing with this shit. I screwed stuff up in New York. I had to pay like a few grand out of pocket, like a year and a half later. It was a disaster. And, um, yeah, the other companies I had were like they were like dev tools and design tools, and it's like sure, you're really helping people, maybe, but for this, we've worked with some real like we've heard some stories from founders who definitely share some of them, but we're going through some really intense stuff, and being able to take this load off their plates and let them kind of move on and find another job, make some more money, start another company. It's actually extremely fulfilling. Despite it being a weird space.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. And I think, that's not an uncommon refrain that I've heard from other folks on the podcast, that usually the best business comes out of whatever your current thing is that you're doing, your current pain point, and then being able to help and solve that for other people. It just seems like, my new business is the exact same case. I feel like most people's is. It's not like you're just sitting somewhere staring in the sky and then all of a sudden this light bulb moment comes to you. Uh, like they will glorify in the movies.
Yeah, exactly.
What are you seeing in the market right now? Because you're obviously very close to it. You're very connected with a lot of VCs and investors. It seems like things maybe are a bit better right now than they were necessarily a year and a half ago. Would you say that's accurate or inaccurate? I was talking to somebody earlier today, and they were talking about how it's interesting to see the dynamics between the private markets and the public markets, because obviously the public markets are pretty much instant. You're a publicly traded
Yeah.
stock in terms of pricing and whatnot, but there's definitely a bit of a lag when it comes to venture. So what are you seeing this year and going into next year? Do you think things are getting better? Are they getting worse?
I think there's still a pretty long tail of the ZERP era going on from what we've seen. There's still a lot of companies coming to us who raise crazy rounds 2020, 2021, 2022 even, that are either, it's a mix. Some folks come to us and yeah, they're cash out, and it's a problem. A lot of folks that come to us and they've got a bunch of money to return, but they've just been taking a lot of swings at bats, and they're just kind of, they couldn't figure it out. They couldn't get to product market fit, and they want to return that capital. So I think from what we've seen, there's definitely more of, I haven't really heard of too much pressure from VCs necessarily from founders, but I think there is, more of an appetite to return capital in some of those cases, and maybe there wasn't as much back in the day. But from what we're seeing, at least again on kind of venture back, primarily tech startup, sphere, it definitely hasn't slowed down. It's been only kind of increasing, especially as year end is coming up. But we're just like a microcosm of the space, so not entirely sure.
Yeah. Well, it seems like there's still a lot of lag from 2020, 2021 that's still sort of sorting itself out, even at the end of 2024 here. It feels like, and would love to get your insight on this, but the amount of capital that's going into businesses that don't have PMF yet is significantly less than the way that it was going in 2019, 2020, even 2021.
Oh yeah, big time. Yeah, definitely. I mean, so a lot of folks will come to us. Sometimes it's actually pretty good where they'll come to us early, and they're still trying to figure out their options, and they're looking at raising bridge rounds, going to their existing investors, looking into M&A, things along those lines. That's always, I think, a great. You got like 9 months cash out, something along those lines. It's really good to start thinking about those things. It just things become really difficult when you have no time and no money, because then you can't sell it. Shutting down becomes a lot more complex. You can't just walk away. If you're insolvent, you got a bunch of debt obligations. Like, it's a lot more expensive than you think, and it's a lot more time consuming and difficult. And yeah, you definitely don't have time to raise capital. So we've definitely been seeing more folks kind of come to us early, looking at their options. But yeah, I mean, a lot of funding rounds. We've anecdotally seen a lot of people have term sheets get pulled at the last minute. Folks who've been trying for 6-9 months to raise a bridge, raise that next round, getting super close, but just folks pulling out at the last minute. So yeah, we've definitely seen a decrease in kind of capital going into companies that don't have truly strong growth.
When it comes to the psychological component of this whole thing, there's obviously a lot of business owners who are listening to this. How do you sort of detach yourself, and how are you able to detach yourself from the personal identity component of it being like your business and not wanting to let it fail? Because even that freaks me out even today with the new business. It's like me. It can't fail. Like, what do you mean it could fail? It's impossible. So how do you get over that hurdle? And what are some things that you did? What are some of the things that you've seen some of the founders that you're interacting with and engaging and working with right now, get through that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I wish I had a better answer for you. I mean, for me personally, so what we see a lot of folks do is travel. I don't know if that works well. That's what I did. Like I rented a van with my wife. We like drove up the PCH, did it help? I don't know. But it was great memories. You know, I think the answer is like, it'll just like, you will feel that way. Right. Like, and I think the only way to kind of heal that is, just for me, it was just taking a bunch of time and just taking more swings at bat, and just trying to start a bunch more companies and playing around with different ideas and just trying to learn from my huge mistakes of the previous ones that didn't work out. But yeah, I mean, I wish I had a better answer, but I don't. I feel the same exact way. I just like, I can't have this one fail. And it felt awful. Like it felt absolutely terrible the first go around. So, and after going through that, like, man, does that keep me up at night? Just like really not wanting to experience that again. So, it's a good question, but I don't have a good answer.
No, I mean, hey, listen, in a van on the PCH doesn't sound that bad. So
It was great. Yeah, it was sick.
I think the thing that I've been told time and time again, even though it's easy to say it, it's a lot harder to like actually believe it. Because if you really do love entrepreneurship, then there's always going to be more businesses. You know, you're not, and it was even the same for selling the first business. You know, because there is that personal identity attachment. Like, there's always going to be something else. There's going to be another one. So it's not. It sounds ridiculous, as we've been talking about, having to shut down your company because it failed. But there's a lot of founders that struggle after they've sold their company, because they don't have it anymore and they don't know what to do. And it's not, you don't have there's so much that goes into that aspect of things as well. I think maybe we've stumbled into our next business here with helping post-exited and post-shutdown founders with figuring out, how to navigate life.
Oh man, I know. It is super challenging on both ends. I think for me too, probably kind of going back to your initial question though, like something that was really helpful, which I didn't do a good job at the time, was just talking to more founders who've been through it. I think a big thing we're trying to do is just kind of remove the stigma of this. Like that, this is a game, if you sign up for the game, you should be well prepared, and we're all well informed that 9 out of 10 don't work out. Like that is the venture math. That is how this is played. And even not in venture, you look at Better Business Bureau data of SMBs, since 1980, and it's like 75% of companies are going to fail within the first 5 to 7 years. So, it's. I agree. It's just, I think what you said is totally accurate. If you really love doing this, you'll just be forced into kind of doing the next one, and hopefully that one will be great.
You obviously see a lot of businesses that have failed. Are there any common themes that you see, or mistakes or patterns amongst the ones that you are having to help dissolve, that you would take away as a potential insight or learning lesson, for lack of a better way to phrase it?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely, we do see some of the hot industries, you know what I mean, and like you're saying, kind of the lagging indicators of those. So we see some betting coming, some crypto, things along those lines. So I think these are all obvious kind of lessons, nothing that's going to be new to any listener. But yeah, it's just kind of jumping on that bandwagon, especially being kind of late to it, can work in many instances, but also might not work out. We just do see a lot of those kind of like clumps coming in at any given time. But yeah, in general, I think a lot of folks we see, they just like raise a bunch of capital. They burn a huge amount by hiring a ton of folks. That's always what it is. And they're really not making much money. And so I think my biggest lesson from that and what we're doing here at Sunset is just being extremely aware of our balance sheet and looking at our P&L and making sure that what we're doing is profitable, and looking at our unit economics and I mean, another big thing too, just on the side note, is debt, right? Like, just, I think founders don't quite understand that debt can follow you, even if you, even if you raise it through the business, right? If you've got personal guarantees on it, if that debt is secured against any assets, anything like that, it's kind of no joke. It just becomes very, very tricky once you're insolvent. So, you know, all the kudos to founders that, you hear the stories, the outlier tales of the folks who like have the credit card binders. Like, I know the Airbnb guys, they always talk about that. They like built up all this like personal credit card debt, and they like binders of it. And, they like kept going and they finally figured it out. And like, that's awesome. But like, you should remember that they're like one of a billion, like they are so, so, so rare. And that story is cool, but it doesn't mean you should copy it. Just be aware that, we just see a lot of this, and it's really tough it's hard to help out. It becomes a lot harder.
I mean, I think the media in general, there's a tendency to, rightfully so, because the story is crazy in that instance, and in some of the other stories that you'll see about the founders, that is not the norm. That's not how most businesses become successful. That's the crazy outlier, which is awesome. But like, what if one or two things went a different way, and then, it's not Airbnb, even if Airbnb did still exist in some capacity, it could be a different company. There's a business that I'm blanking on the name of that basically was Yelp before Yelp was the thing. But because of like the server technologies or something, they had to shut down like a year before Yelp got started. And then Yelp became what it was because of timing and all of those other things and factors that go into it. So, it's good to read the books about Airbnb or to read the books about some of these companies that have these crazy, like, rising from the ashes stories. But that's not necessarily the model that you should emulate and want to, aspire to be stressed as one. I can't even imagine how stressed they had to have been at that point.
Oh my God, I know. But I think actually something, kind of, again, going back to your earlier question, something that is interesting too, is we definitely come across a lot of companies and they'll come to us winding down, and they pivoted a lot. We've talked to some companies because we help them out with their assets. We try and understand what's up with their IP, things like that. And some of these folks we talk to have like 5 different products. And that's another thing too, it's just, these things take so much time. I mean, as you know, very, very well, like it's just not, it goes back to these outlier stories, the YC stories of like Code Academy and all these things of just like, oh, I launched it and now I have like 1 million users. And if it doesn't all check that box ahead of time, don't do it. Or, if you don't see crazy traction in the first like 10 days, you should move on to the next one. I think that mentality has really kind of plagued the industry as a whole. And it's just such a long game. Like, you just need to stay in it. So I would say those are another kind of factor of things we've seen. But again, kind of going back to debt too, like especially on the e-com side, speaking of that, when we talk to e-com companies, we often see a lot of debt obligations, a lot of inventory that's been unsold, different lines of credit, personal guarantees, personal credit cards being maxed out. So we definitely see that even more so on the e-com side for whatever reason. And again, I just be cautious, especially with personal guarantees. That's coming right back to you. The corporate shell will protect you to a degree for sure. But just be careful with all types of debt instruments. Just know what you're getting into ahead of time, really model that out and make sure you can make those payments. And if not, try and kind of put the halt on it earlier rather than waiting till the very end.
What are your thoughts around like venture debt? Because I've had a few founders who I know who, they might not have any issues with their business, but then they trigger a covenant and, the venture debt is going to come in and like take their business and sell it off for parts or just like blow it up. Is that something that you've seen come through your door as well?
Yeah, we have. Yeah, we have. Yeah, it's just another thing to be super cautious about and really understand what your covenants are. We've seen a bunch of folks where it's like you might have a decent chunk of capital left back in your bank, but that bank is held, based on covenant, that bank is held with, whatever facility you took it out from. And, like you said, you reach that number, they're going to take all that money. And now you're going to be a cash out zero that you might not even expect. Like we've seen that, we've heard of that. And, yeah, again, just be careful with that stuff. It can be pretty nasty.
Going back to your comment about the pivoting, even for this new business, it's taken so much time and effort and investment to get it to this point. I can't even imagine if we pivoted right now, or if we, had multiple product lines or something. Yeah. And I think sometimes with a pivot, you might even be better off just starting a new company, because let's say you pivot, but you only have, 6 months of burn left. But if it was a new business and you had 18 months, then you'd actually be able to see that through, and it would have that product market fit and you could start to grow it. But 6 months is an untenable timetable to try and, go for something when it may or may not be better for you to just, walk away.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think, just the pivot's been really romanticized. And I think people have very different definitions of it. I think and again, you hear the story of Slack, right? They were working on something totally different. It's like a video game and then they made Slack, but it's just so rare. These things are so rare. I totally agree. And what they also don't account for too is normally when you pivot, you're feeling the pressure at that point, right? Like you know that the first thing didn't work out. You've already burned X amount of capital, like you're saying. You don't have that much left. Your investors are like, what the fuck are you doing? It's, that pressure can force you to make bad decisions and be even less patient, ironically, with that next one, for it to magically work out. So yeah, I totally agree. I think a lot of folks could be better off just kind of winding things down, taking a beat, and kind of seeing what they can test out and figure out for that next one. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, I got one last question for you before we wrap things up here. If you are a business owner and you have to, go through the dissolution process, for better or worse, whether it's an asset sale, or if you need to, just walk away, how do they go about, getting started with you? What does that process look like? How does that whole thing pan out?
Yeah, totally. So, I'll say too, feel free to talk to us no matter what. We know a bunch of different people in this industry: lawyers, bankruptcy attorneys, firms that do alternatives to bankruptcy. We're not a great fit for everyone, right? But founder, we're always just here to help folks at this time. So yeah, feel free to reach out just to get intros or referrals to other places. But that being said, yeah, we really try and handle, like I said, that end-to-end dissolution process, just kind of all the legal work, tax work. You'll have a project manager on your team as well. Just, really our whole goal is to help you move on to what's next and not have to worry about this. So yeah, feel free to, email me directly, brendan@sunsethq.com, or feel free to go to our site, sunsethq.com, book some time. Someone from our team will be happy to chat with you and send you on your way, or kind of find some other solution if we're not a great fit.
I lied. I have one last question. Do you have any thoughts around, areas or opportunities of expansion for you, outside of just, dissolution, whether it be asset sales, if this company comes to you, maybe you can sell off parts. I'm sure there's a lot of different things that have come up that you'd be like, oh, maybe we could do that, but maybe we shouldn't, but we could, and then maybe we make more money, and then you might have your own, multiple product lines.
Yeah, no, I think you're totally right. I mean, we're very excited about the adjacent opportunities, and just, trying to help founders, even like you were, earlier in the process, and kind of get them the outcome that they actually want, right? They don't want to dissolve. So can we help them find ways to not get to that point. So yeah, we're super excited about doing that. But yeah, right now, going back to, pivoting and focus, it's super hard, but this being my third go around, I think that is one thing I've gotten better at, is just not being as tempted to try and do everything and just stay really focused on what's working. So yeah, that's what we're doing now. But we definitely know a lot of buyers, a lot of bankers. So again, if you're interested in selling, happy to chat and again, kind of refer you out, things like that.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you coming on. Thanks again for taking the time. We'll put your info in the show notes as well. So if people need to reach out, they can. But thanks again for everybody listening. As always, this is Brendan Amoroso. You can find me at brandonamoroso.com or scaleless.ai. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.